Hi guys. Hi David. Hi Anne. How are you?
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, good. Mate. Yourself?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, might as well get straight into it.
It's been
How's
good.
yeah, we're good, man. All good. How's COVID affect the lighting industry?
Do you want me to go first, Anne?
Yeah, might as well, Dave.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah, you go
sure.
first. Yeah.
Um, First of all, I suppose, giving a little bit of context, I'll just reiterate Timothy's early comments. I think that this is like at a really good time, really good timing, this whole event. And I think there's, you said the key word there, optimism. And I'm eternally optimistic. So if you want to come to someone who's going to give you a story of woe and hard luck, you're certainly not going to get it here. So I think that, yeah, like with everything opening back up and, you know, obviously there's a lot more optimism out there, a lot of people back on construction sites. Actually, probably one of my favourite things about the moment is I can actually get back on construction sites and get the smell of those adhesives and everything out there. I didn't realise how much I missed all that stuff and dust in the air and concrete particles and whatnot. But getting back out there and getting your hands dirty has been quite a good thing. But yeah, so like I'm feeling pretty positive about everything. But sort of, I suppose with that first question in terms of how does it affect the lighting industry, my sort of take on it is that sometimes I feel like the stuff's sort of overthought as well a lot. You know, when I first read that question, when it was sent through, I was like, does it really, like, what's the angle here? Like, how does it affect lighting at the end of the day? You know, there's a lot more priorities I see before lighting. But, you know, then when I started thinking about it, I was thinking, you know, I feel like there's, you know, a lot of sort of social and environmental initiatives out there that have been, for use of a better term, on the fringe. You know, and I feel like if anything, this is an opportunity to accelerate those and propel them forward. So when it comes to lighting design, I would specifically talk about, I suppose, things like Green Star, well standards, all this sort of thing, you know, talking about, you know, efficacy, efficiency, visual comfort, the use of controls, you know, using recycled elements within luminaires, you know. So I feel like it's probably an opportunity, or the effects it'll have is lighting designers, I suppose, you know, having to scrutinise, you know, specifications, where the fittings come. I know they do at the moment scrutinise specifications, but probably down onto a deeper level, you know, in terms of like, where does the luminaire come from? You know, what type of tooling is used to make it? Is it a die cast? Is it an extrusion? How is that process happening? How are things being painted? Are they low VOC paints? What's being used? You know, what's the manufacturing process? What's the labour? You know, all those sorts of things, and really probably scrutinising things on a more detailed level. And then particularly, obviously, we've got lead times and all that sort of thing, impacts on that, which I'm sure we'll get into later on. So I feel like, yeah, there was already things out there happening, you know, and I feel like, you know, but more, it's just going to be widely accepted or going to be more propelled into the mainstream. You know, things like the circular economy as well, you know, thinking about, you know, brief stage right through to end of life and what happens to fittings at the end of life, you know, how's the design implemented, all that sort of thing. And also probably the way we collaborate, obviously, is a big thing as well. So I know we briefly had a chat the other day and I was sort of mentioning about, you know, collaboration and the way it happens remotely now, that there's obviously pros and cons to it. But I feel like as in the lighting, design and supply world, there's also some advantages to take advantage of sort of that more on hand. Even though it's not really face to face, we're more quickly to get online and collaborate these days instead of sending multiple emails, which I think is a really positive thing as well, which I think you'll see a net, you know, really positive result for lighting design.
What about you, Anne?
Yeah, so I'm thinking from basically from a perspective of working from home, and this is what I discussed with my partner as I mentioned during our chats prior to this webinar. It's just interesting in terms of the lighting environment when you're in a work from home capacity, and it was just sort of brainstorming, and I'm just thinking in terms of the Australian standards and all that kind of stuff. I mean, everyone's pretty stringent on, well, most people are pretty stringent on trying to achieve the, you know, the 320 lux on the desk or 240 in boardrooms and things like that. But at home, you don't really think about that at all. So with the shift or now with the open-mindedness of a work from home option, how does that translate to the home space? Who looks after the lighting levels in your house? Is what happens if you get eye strain in your house? What's going to happen there? Do the standards cover, the home office? Should the standards change to accommodate this, and what's the way moving forward in terms of that? I'm really looking forward to potentially designing home offices, lighting for home offices in the future, because it becomes really personal after that. It becomes your own personal space, because there's also the thought of how do you differentiate between the spaces, say, in a really tiny apartment where you're working in the kitchen or working in a tiny sort of desk in the corner. What are some new things that we could do to enhance those spaces so that you can function well at home? Because you need to work from home for whatever reason. You might work, you might live 2 hours away or something like that. You might have children. It's a new direction, I think, and it's quite exciting in terms of what COVID has brought about in terms of the way we work every day, and the potential of using technology on how we conduct our day-to-day, working lives. That's what's been churning around sort of in my head for the possibilities of COVID, the possibilities that COVID has brought out in throughout this year.
Do you think? Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think you bring up a fantastic point. I'm the same sort of thing. I've moved into my wife's studio. She's an interior architect. I'm sitting in the draftee's desk, essentially. And I've got lots of natural daylight. I don't need to turn the lights on at all. And I really enjoyed the fact of not having to turn the lights on, not being under under a sort of a light every day has been fantastic. And I've got a little task light that I turn on at night, and I get the domestic lovely atmosphere, warm white light. And I remember there's Mick Pierce, who designed CH2 council building. He talked about domesticity and how to try and get that into the office, because they worked out years ago that if you could actually bring your home into the office, that people would work longer and be a lot more comfortable, and you'd end up with a sort of a lot less issue. So I think that this is a marvelous opportunity for the lighting industry. Sorry, David, I disrupted you.
No. All I was going to say, I was just going to reiterate your sentiment, really. Number one, you have nailed your light there, mate, like that natural light. I'm very jealous. So I'd love to have that in the house. But I think going back to Anne's point is that I just wrote down that the home office and tunable white, and I was thinking about things like that. It's a really good point you make around like standards within an office. I think you mentioned standards there, like about the home office and how that, obviously the standards in an office, we were talking about, J6 regulations or lux level standards, whatever it might be, glare or that sort of thing. Is that going to apply to a residential office, or is it at least at the minimum something to really think about, like you're saying, like I know I mentioned before about, sort of social and environmental policies being accelerated, and it's probably a similar thing with lighting. Like what you're sort of talking about there is, you might get things like tunable white, which obviously starting to be used commercially, human-centric lighting, all that sort of stuff. But maybe this propels it, more mainstream, quicker. Where, like you said, if someone's working in the kitchen, it's a really good point. Not everyone's got a little office set up too. You might be in there with your partner or whatnot in the office, but when he's talking to lags, and I always get kicked out, I always find myself in the kitchen or in one of the kids' bedrooms. So, having that versatility all around the space, I suppose, always talk about versatility in commercial spaces, but maybe that versatility translates into the residential spaces as well.
I think you bring up an amazing point, which is, adaptable spaces, so I know that some of my crew are working off the kitchen desk. And just, it's amazing how, we spend so many hours in the office and so little time at home, and then all of a sudden we're here, and you realize that these places are perfectly adaptable, just like everything else. And it's just a marvelous opportunity for the lighting industry. wanted to ask you guys, do you think the lighting industry is in crisis, or do you think we're going forward?
I think I don't think it's so much in crisis. I'm thinking it's just shifting to a different area. So previously I would see a lot of lighting design requests coming through for commercial spaces and all that kind of stuff. But now that commercial spaces aren't really being utilized this year, there's actually been a massive increase in upgrades of private homes, which I find quite amusing, because it just ties into, I think, a lot of people have realized either it's really annoying working with their partners, or it's you get a great synergy working with your partner, or you definitely feel, I mean, I certainly felt that when I worked from home for a few months just in a row, that I really missed the office heating and cooling systems. That was something that I really missed, and you sort of start realizing the that strong line between home and office, and what it takes to make you feel sustained and comfortable, and just to be able to function in your day to day. So in terms of the lighting in crisis, I think, I mean, in terms of the economy, everything was suffering this year, not just lighting. But I think coming out of this, I think there's a renewed appreciation for the industry, I think, for people who do work from home, and that sort of shift in feel between how you felt at the office and how you functioned at the office, and also how you function from home when working from home. So I think I personally think it's just a zeitgeist shift, a shift in mentality and how we think about the space that we work in, and how we can, create lighting designs for it, and how we can supply it, what kind of products are suitable for those new spaces. I think it will bring some level of innovation, I feel.
What about you, Dave?
I've exactly on the same lines. You articulate it really well. I'm not going to articulate nowhere near as well as that, Anne, but to summarise it, I just think, my philosophy always is one person's crisis is another's opportunity. And I just think that, obviously there has been, don't want to dilute things. Obviously it's been hard-hitting effects all around the world and different economies, different sectors, that sort of thing. But I feel like there's an opportunity here as well. And it's just about finding those opportunities. We discussed those in that first question. We've just laid out plenty of them, So I feel like there are some areas that, you're possibly saying crisis, but there's plenty more opportunities, I think, that outweigh the crisis component. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I think the opportunity is abound. I mean, I find it really hard when people ask me about lighting a house. Because you certainly don't want to light it like an office. You ruin all that beautiful atmosphere and that sort of incredible feeling that you get. It's just fantastic that people are now thinking about their homes. It's amazing when I would go past Bunnings. There's a queue out the front, people trying to get into Bunnings. Bunnings must just thought they arrived in heaven. And the car park's full. You can't find a car park anywhere. Like it's the all of a sudden, I think what's happened is that, people are spending a considerable amount of time in their domestic pad and going, I can make this hell of a lot better than it is now. And I think that's what's really happened with the industry across the board. It's amazing how you just can't find things. Like the other day, I was looking for something in Bunnings and they'd run out of it. And it was just like, thinking, how can you run out of that? It's just like, and so it's just been amazing that I can't believe how some retailers have done incredibly well, and other retailers have obviously struggled just with the sort of shift that's happened. Which gets me to the other point. I mean, how have you guys gone with the supply and servicing the market and communicating with your clients and all of that sort of thing? I mean, I've found a big shift in the way that I've had to communicate. Just what's happened with you guys?
I feel like the communication is a really good point. And it's funny because I've been asking people a lot this lately, because I've found it being a really positive experience, because the way we work, because we do a bit of design and a bit of supply on sort of small to medium-sized projects only, we, like a lot of retail, hospitality, residential, that sort of thing, single dwelling, we'll get to send multiple projects a week and get briefed in email, you know, get a 2-page email, the Dropbox link, some inspiration, some, you know, a bit of a brief on what the client's seeking and whatnot. And that's, you know, probably 8 times out of 10, that's how we get briefed. But now people are way quicker to jump on Zoom or Teams or Skype, whatever it is, and brief you that way. And I feel like it's just so much more of a collaborative process. And, you know, it just sort of ties up loose ends straight away. You don't go down a rabbit hole designing something that's not, you know, wasting time. I think it's way more efficient. And I think you really get down to the nitty gritty straight away. And it's just far more collaborative. So you talk, throwing around ideas quicker, talking about things, you get settled on things, really get an understanding of what they're after. You know, whereas in the past, people might have been a bit resistant to get you to come in and sit down and talk about that. But because it's, you know, all at your fingertips is virtual meetings now, I think it's a really, really positive thing when it comes to collaboration. And then end results, you're going to see it in end results.
Yeah, fantastic. What about you, Anne?
Yeah, I don't know if it's because of certain types of projects, say for government projects, but I've noticed a little bit of a trend towards sourcing things quite locally. And, you know, it's all about trying to support the local economy and things like that. And everyone's quite focused on Australian made. It's quite interesting because I was actually asking around recently for, you know, and a locally made IP rated wall light. And there's just not a lot of local options there, and I wonder if this is going to be, you know, a temporary focus or a long-term focus. And I mean, I hope it's a long-term focus because, you know, there's plenty of designers here and there's plenty of talent here locally in Australia and also in Melbourne who create who have very, very awesome ideas for luminaire design. And it's just that the market's always asking for something at a certain price point. Well, you know, sometimes they're open to sort of the higher end, but it makes me wonder if this is a long-term opportunity for local manufacturing to occur. I don't know. I tend to think that things are, you know, sometimes things are going more towards the DNC sort of route, which sort of asks for luminaires to be supplied at a certain point. So it really makes me, I'm sort of on the fence with regards to the Australian made. I mean, obviously I'd love for people to be more focused on the Australian made stuff, because like, even if it's like custom or, you know, the odd piece here and there, but it would be nice to incorporate for you know, developers and clients to be willing to, you know, include 1 or 2 pieces or, you know, certain parts of the project to have that. But I do understand that in terms of budget, sometimes that might not be feasible. There's something that Philippe has mentioned something about controlling fatigue through suitable lighting. That's, I'll just do.
Yeah, what about tunable lighting? You guys getting that as a big request? You know, tunable light.
Yeah, I think Anne's frozen there for a sec. Can you hear me okay, Anne?
I think it's your.
Okay.
No, I can see you now. Yep. Oh, answering that for controlling fatigue in the home, that's quite interesting. I think it's not just about tunable white, but also including as much flexibility as possible. both in the working environment, controlling your color temperature as well. I think because everyone experiences fatigue in different ways, and being able to have that flexibility to manage that yourself according to your own needs is quite important, and for products to be available to allow for that would be fantastic, like from a domestic point of view, because at work you've got all sorts of things to be able to kind of manage that, because we've been office workers for a very, very long time now, so I think we're sort of achieving that quite well. But in terms of working from home, it's quite a different well, it's a very new area of a way of thinking and operating. So I think introducing as much flexibility as possible will be key to managing fatigue.
Spot on. I might just circle back to a really relevant point you made about the supply chain there, Anne, like the locally produced stuff. And I think just taking it back one step, I think there's a few factors that contribute to that. I think it's what I spoke about earlier about the social and environmental sort of initiatives that they're being propelled, but also think that obviously being importer, doing a mix of importing and locally produced stuff ourselves, that obviously timelines at the moment are a bit on projects a little bit schizophrenic. Things are paused, things are put back on. There's delays, whatnot. So being able to support short lead times locally is a really key issue. And also there's a lot of delays with limited flights coming in at the moment with all that sort of thing. So costs obviously to bring things in are also increasing as well. So you're looking at that difference between locally produced and imported, the gap's being shortened.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned a really good point there before too about it being feasible for commercial projects too. Sometimes locally produced isn't, but I suppose it's a really good shift or just mentality for people to have, just to think about, well, if I can't make 100% of this light locally because we can't supply 400 track lights on a job made in Australia, it's just not going to work. But committing to doing as much as we can. So whether that's doing the casting overseas and procuring other stuff locally, using local assemble staff to assemble it locally, also packaging, all that sort of thing, thinking about what the maximum we can do locally to control everything, obviously pump money into the local economy.
Yeah, I got a question here from the panel. we're talking about that there seems to be a logical shift going on to office to residential property. So what are the kind of measures that you guys are looking at to make the home office comfortable, health and safety, all of those sort of things? What sort of measures from a lighting point of view have you guys been recommending?
Let's see. Well, I guess, as I mentioned before, I think flexibility is the key thing, because everyone's home office is different, everyone's house is different, everyone's internal space and tastes are different. I think it's quite important to be able to separate the home office from your living environment, so it doesn't feel like you're in the office 24/7, which can be quite depressing. So I think flexibility is the key thing, and whether that be color temperature or even table lamps, or it's the individual's choice, because everyone reacts to or like experiences light very differently. Everyone's got an individual set of eyes, so flexibility is the most. And the world is your oyster. I think at the very least, the lighting needs to complement the natural daylight coming in to your internal space, and balance that out, because I'm in a space with a lot of natural daylight now, and same with you, Ian, and we can both attest that it feels really, really, really great. So I think balancing that and trying to bring that into the home environment, but then also allowing the flexibility to dim it down at night so that it still feels like you're home. And that can include warm color temperatures and lower light levels and such.
I feel like too that, and you mentioned really a couple of good points there technically and also like strategically positioning and sort of integration, that sort of CCT and CRI sort of starting to become mainstream now too. I feel like with video conferencing, people are really starting to take a bit more notice about the environment and the technical quality of light. I've had so many people friends, family, different people ask me about, oh, what decent light can I get to make myself look good on video conferencing? And that's how the conversation starts, you know, and they're starting to realize color temperature. People who didn't know the difference between cool white and warm white, now they know. They're wise to it now. Like if you did a straw poll out there, I'm sure you'd get a huge amount of the population now that understand the basics of color temperature that didn't a year ago, you know, and then that ties in perfectly. The next conversation is CRI, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know? So CRI around the home, you know, if you're an architect and you're, you know, doing video conferencing, showing samples to a potential client, you obviously want to have good CRI in your office or your kitchen or wherever it is. And we've got two things in your kitchen. You can show your samples off and you can cook a meal at night and look like Heston Blumenthal. But, you know, it's about the better quality of light, I think. So it's not only just placement. It's exactly what Am is alluding to there. It's actually integrating better quality of light within the home as well.
We've got another little question. Do you guys, with the Australian made, are you getting that from your clients? A lot of clients are going, let's just do it in Australia.
Yeah, we sort of we've got a couple of ranges ourselves that are Australian made, and it's obviously, you know, when we speak to a lot of architects in the A&D community, you know, interior designers, a lot of them are requesting it. Not necessarily Australian made, you know, don't have to say you have to have Australian made certification necessarily. Like obviously it's advantageous to have that stamp of approval, but, you know, I don't think no longer you can just claim, you know, oh, we locally produce this or whatever it is. People are looking a little bit deeper, you know, so I think you need to really back it up with, you know, which that obviously helps with having the Australian made certification. But, you know, as long as you can support, you know, your claims to locally producing things, you know, you're not just putting one screw in when the fitting comes in from China or, you know, whatever it might be, you know, repacking it, or, you know, you're actually doing a significant portion. Like I said, mentioned before, sometimes in a lot of cases, I don't think you can do everything locally. You know, some cases you can, some you can't. But I think really people, the overarching principle I've found out there is specify just want a commitment that you're doing as much as you can.
Yeah. What about you, Anne?
Yeah, I agree with all of David's points. Really, that's yeah. I don't have much to add from that. There's a lot of questions coming through. I don't know if we have, but we can certainly answer them. I don't know,
the design and
or
construction
afterwards.
model is a really interesting one. Which is sort of how the lighting industry, sort of a lot of projects are going in that direction. Obviously speed, that's happening in our office as well. What do you guys think of the design and construction model as far as delivering, you know, great results, good quality lighting in particular?
I personally, and this is my own personal opinion, I really don't like the DNC route because not only one of the panelists have said just the lack of accountability, and there's no focus on providing quality stuff anymore. It's pretty much I personally feel this might not be the case, that it's a race to the bottom, and it's no longer about thinking about what the occupants feel. And what the occupants experience in that space anymore. The focus has shifted towards let's get this building up as quickly and as efficiently, both in terms of time and budget as possible, and whilst sacrificing the sort of internal space and everything like that. And just from a collaboration and coordination point of view, it's I don't know, to me it's almost a bit messy. I'm quite a meticulous person. I like doing things, you know, step by step, all that kind of stuff, just in a long line. And doing things in a rushed manner, I think, just introduces a lot of just so many risk factors, and it doesn't take into account the longevity of a building as well. It doesn't take into account like that, you know, this space, we want this to be designed like this, and for the design life to last for 10, 15, 20 years or what have you.
What about you, Dave?
Look, I understand Anne's points there, like, and she does have some very relevant points. I feel like there is, you know, a lot of examples out there of, you know, use of a better term, crude construction out there when it has been done through D&C. But I also think too, it's sort of in its infancy in a way, like it has been around for a while. But I feel like, you know, if things are shifting that way too, it's almost like, okay, how is everyone going to deal with that and just make sure we deliver good quality projects? And it's considering exactly what Anne said there. So it's having people be able to consult and in these organisations that are doing D&C to make sure they have got wise heads there that can, you know, really consider this thing instead of just banging out projects. You know, it's you are really thinking about what you're delivering.
Another one is any COVID-related lighting solutions, considerations for non-domestic projects like an office, hospital, or a library?
For me, I guess in terms of libraries and things like that, I think the very basis of lighting design is getting light where you need it. It's not just about uniform light everywhere, which is what, you know, you kind of had back in the 90s and early 2000s, where you just chucked everything in a grid and called it, you know, just like, yeah, that's done, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely something, like getting light to where you need it. And because of COVID, so everyone's expected to socially distance and keep a lot of space. So you can, there's a great opportunity to include, you know, like sort of that sort of warm campfire feel, you know, just something that draws that person and it sort of feels intimate within that space, even if it's in an open space or whatever. You can use acoustic panels, you can take advantage of the colors and finishes and the sort of, you know, the little individual hubs and make that sort of feel very welcoming, very intimate and very, again, very flexible. You want to be able to give the individual a lot of choice in how to curate their own environment for the time that they're in that space.
Yeah, your points there. There was actually something you mentioned beforehand that I meant to mention, which sort of ties in with this, is when you talk about a residential application and the mood, and it takes Anne's point too of warmth, is that, you know, a lot of the projects we're getting briefed on now, you know, is certainly not put a grid of downlights, you know, 1.5 meters apart on my ceiling. It's, you know, how do I light my house like a hotel? How do I light it like the Crown Metropole? How do I, you know, like people really are interested about, you know, more, you know, light in targeted spaces, less is more, you know, curating their lighting design to make sure the spaces you're using are illuminated and the other spaces may not be, you know, just circulation spaces might not have too much light in there. So, and when it comes to commercial, I feel like exactly reiterating Anne's point is portable, particularly around the workplace, you know, massive amount of flexibility is going to be required. It was already there anyway, but I feel like it's going to go to another level, you know, use of obviously, you know, track systems, whatever it might be, to change fittings around, be versatile, but I think more integrated lighting within workstations as well. So like integrated components, plug and play, they can plug into your workstation and light up, you know, whatever it might be, you know, tunable light or that sort of thing. So that definitely that versatility where a space can change from an office to, you know, who knows, childcare centre, you know, within, you know, 2 days.
Just seeing if we're getting any more questions.
But I think natural light too, just, I know we talked about that before, but just in general, we talked about it in the residential sense, but it's just everywhere in general. I think it's going to really make everyone step up their game when it comes to the use of natural light as well, and really harvesting as much natural light as they can for these environments, because, and that obviously comes down to the architecture, as you know, so it will require, again, it's probably another opportunity for lighting designers getting involved in projects early, you know, obviously because it's efficiency, it's, you know, it's beautiful to be in, it's effective, it's very versatile, natural light, you know, like you can move anything anywhere and it still lights up. So I think that probably presents another massive opportunity.
Yeah, and also a push for daylight like artificial light as well. Just you know, hopefully, I mean that's always the ultimate goal, trying to emulate natural daylight and bring it into the internal space artificially. I think now there's an even greater need or desire for that technology, and I certainly hope the LED chip manufacturers will progress to there very, very soon.
No, you're spot on.
When I saw tunable lighting 2012, in Frankfurt, I thought, geez, you know, that would be fantastic, but I couldn't imagine anybody actually doing it. And now we're in this domestic situation, you just can see how important it is. And, you know, all those solo glass screens that a few people were flogging and got absolutely nowhere. You can see that that'll be really appealing for offices in the future.
Yeah.
You guys have you had any experiments with that sort of technology? In terms of solar access and that sort of thing?
Not personally, no.
No, not personally. Not personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting world. And I mean, if you can replicate that through white light, that would be just amazing. Yeah, I think offices in the future are going to change radically. And I think houses will be exactly the same. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely spot on.
So.
And I think, you know, again, we talk about that versatility, but I feel like everyone out there has an appreciation for some technical characteristics of lighting now. So it makes our argument a lot easier for CCT tunable white, you know, high CRI, you know, fittings, or with broad color spectrum. And I feel like, you know, it's obviously going to elevate everything to the next level. So I know I said at the start, I started this whole thing by saying that I think everyone's overthinking it, but now we've talked about it, I'm like, maybe we weren't overthinking it. There are a lot of opportunities there.
That's exciting. Yes.
Fantastic. I'm going to have to butt in here and crack my whip as the MC. That was a great chat, guys. So thank you for sharing your time and your insights, and you were mastering the questions as they were coming in from our attendees as well, all at once. So I promised early on that we would keep this right on track. So everybody, would you please thank Ian Dryden, David Justice, and Anne Truong for being on this panel. Thanks, guys, very much.
Quick photo.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Can you send a photo? Bye.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I got it.
All right.
All right. See ya. Bye.
All right. See ya. Bye.